Bom, boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you in one more FEBRABAN TECH, the third or event number 35.
Biometria nos
Adoption of biometrics in finance has expanded based on the need to improve the transactions and convenience of customers. In the banks, facial biometrics is quickly an essential part of the digital onboarding, increasing the opening of the accounts and checking identity. Added to artificial intelligence, several biometrics have given more expansion to the services in scenarios that we have. The use of modern techniques and biometric authentication have challenges. To talk to us about the benefits and the use of biometrics with reduction of fraud, operational efficiency, savings, and challenges, the owners of biometrics call to the floor Alberto Fiocchi, Director of Products of Rappi.
O Caio Rocha, diretor de autenticação.
Caio Rocha, the Director of Prevention of Fraud of Serasa Experian.
O Idamar Ferreira,
Idamar Ferreira,
superintendente de segurança da Caixa.
Who's the superintendent at the Caixa, and also Michele Nogueira, who's an associate professor of the University of Minas Gerais, UFMG. Welcome, everyone, and thank you.
Bom, vamos lá.
So, to get the ball rolling, I'm going to ask everyone the same question. Thank you all for being here. We're glad to have you. I'd like to start by asking you to tell us about the use of biometrics, how it's evolved in recent years. What is the state of the art today? And in the case of Rappi, Serasa, and Caixa Econômica, what are the prospects? Can we start with Michele to give us an overview?
Obrigada, Walter. Obrigada a todos.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you to everyone in the audience as well. Let's talk about changes that have happened in biometrics recently. If we think back a little bit, it was used, biometrics, essentially in physical systems. For example, a fingerprint, for example, clocking in, clocking off. But in the digital systems, the change has also been driven by the use of biometric authentication as a way of a credentialing method using the measurements of our bodies. And it's happening either through, for example, image recognition, facial recognition, voice recognition, and also continuous authentication. Continuous authentication is, these are the three pillars that I'd like to stress. Bringing ease of use, we need to make authentication easier with less friction, transparency, which is essential in the process, and this leads to greater security in the system. So this evolution has accelerated owing to the evolution of digital systems. We also need to analyze the integration of AI, which is driving use and the security in authentication, biometrical authentication, especially to address deepfakes, where we need to really know in terms of the face, whether it is a real face or an AI-generated image of a face. And AI can let us know if that's happening. And AI also boosts security in its use as a means of validating biometrical images, and the continuous use of authentication in processes, which is turning the system, which was a static system, for example, physical biometrics, to a more dynamic system, essentially more complex because it's not just manual authentication, and it comes as a means of boosting the process in a complex environment. Another point to highlight in the change is multi-mode authentication through biometrics, a number of different measures, which are a way of bringing security into the process. Everything I'm saying, it may or may not be implemented or deployed in a final form, but in terms of studies and research, we see some deployments in the context. And the last point to highlight is regulation, which directs the evolution that we see over the course of the process and probably for the next few years.
Fioc, como a RAP tem...
Fioc, how about this evolution in RAPI? Well, thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here at this panel. At RAPI, our answer is, it depends, because if you're a deliverer, a delivery worker, you have access to the financial system. For example, I'm going to put, a card in your hand, or I might actually have to transport money and also have resource to ATMs. So the function of the delivery agent is very critical. We use a lot of facial biometry, and this generates friction. But since the persona of the delivery staff, and they need to make a quick delivery, then they submit to the issues. We have our KPIs always to reduce. It's part of the business model. From the user's point of view, the scenario is different. At RAPI, because of the regulation, we are obliged to have a QR. We've been using multimodal systems for a while. We have a certain appetite for risk. We give that to the user to understand who the user is, what they're doing. We've used AI models, device location, a number of variables which are part of the biometry of the person to see what kind of friction, at what moment of the journey. Today, for example, the state of the art. It's not here yet, but I can generate different types of friction depending on the step of the journey where they are. I can apply rules and control groups and say, this rule is working well or badly with a certain rate of confidence. To work with this user might not be a good user for myself. So it's a trade-off between how much friction to generate and how much the user or the actor is putting on the table in terms of money. That's a marginal contribution. And I can be more flexible in my appetite for risk that way. Itamar, in the Caixa Econômica.
Bom, na Caixa, o presidente da Caixa teve aqui...
The CEO of the Caixa was here the day before yesterday at the opening and spoke about the change in profile of our technological profile at the Caixa. We've invested a lot recently. Biometry has become a great difference, a great advantage in reducing friction. I'm responsible for anti-fraud. We think straight away that anti-fraud is a trade-off between friction and an appetite for loss. Every product has a loss associated. The professor spoke really well. There are a number of technologies that are being implemented. Our state of the art for us is that we can match the least possible friction with the least appetite for loss.
conjunto de clientes que é
We can't always avoid friction, but we have a particular niche in the Caixa, for example, physical presence.
muito lá. Então,
Customers go to the Caixa physically.
movimentação na sua
So if the customer is going to, for example, withdraw money without any paper or device, just by going to a lottery shop or a branch or the ATM and putting their fingerprint down there, okay, well, that's okay for them, maybe. In terms of security, facial recognition is great, it lowers friction.
longe,
But the security is not quite where
diferente da minha
the fingerprint is. My fingerprint, for example, my face may be on the internet and my face may be public. So it's hard to make that formula. We can't guarantee that somebody who has something of a social profile and they're close to technologies which are not the average of the population,
dá para ele confiança
putting their fingerprint, that gives
o universo inteiro.
reliability.
Na nossa
And also in our journey, there is a situation where the customer uses the face to navigate, to recover a couple of things, but we can't do everything like that. This is the art today. This is not for everyone. But first,
questão de biometria,
in biometrics, I think we are far from the state of the art. I'm sure that there won't be long until we have technological solutions that will look more into biometric factors than today. You're going to take your cell phone and I can discover you are you, not because of the format, but because of your DNA or your sweat. I'm sure that will be like that in the future. That's what will identify us, our biometrics, rather than the number of number and
eu espero
characters that you can keep it. I hope that happens soon.
de biometria.
It's a challenge for banks and for biometrics industries.
Serasa.
Caio, about Serasa. As a provider, our obsession is to have infallible biometrics, facial, or the new ones that are going to arise. What we need to make sure is that that person is that person with biometric signs. And all that with balance of friction, the state of the art would be 100% of detection without failure and 100% of conversion of good consumers. And we've asked a great deal in technology and intelligence to be close to this state of the art. And that's requires a lot of investment. We have high levels of investments, but it's far from our ambition. And we're investing a great deal in labs, in analysis to understand what's happening. AI is deep fake, how we counterattack. So this is continuous, and we believe there is no silver bullet. Whatever biometrics, they will solve one issue. That face comes from that person. When you apply other levels, you potentialize the gain in detection. So we believe in that. And even in biometrics, we work in applying algorithms in different steps of the process. So since capture, we have cybersecurity, convergence with important is important in we see the traffic if there has been we can intercept devices. There are several visual computation to analyze images. So we do several combinations so that we know that that person is that person, that image was taken by that person. It's not an injection or deep fake or presentation from a screen. So that's a free of error conversion using technology. Thank you very much. I think we have mentioned the friction of our customers.
Ponto que nos
And this is a point that concerns us because of the fact that we have to take
forma deles acessarem os nossos aplicativos, né?
the way they work with our apps and to bring security. We seek to take this security with the best tools possible and always making sure we don't hinder the journey of the customer. So in the financial world, we pay a lot of attention to that. In our apps, we'll always see that all the time there is something different working. It's fast, but many things people think it's too slow, but it's necessary because of the volume of fraud there is.
Ainda mantendo a
So keeping the talk in the present, a research by the Internet Management Committee about privacy and data protection revealed that 72% of the banking customers are worried about providing biometric data to financial institutions. LGPD
são dados sensíveis.
says that the biometrics are sensitive data, so keeping a database with this kind of references demands request
Quais cuidados de segurança
and demands.
precisam ter em cada
What kind of care should we all have, and how to have the customers at ease?
A gente tem que ter em mente que
We have to keep in mind that the financial institutions and what the bank sells is trust.
esse é o ativo mais
So this is the most important asset that we have. It's very important for the customer to understand that data is sensitive, but will be more sensitive to us.
vez que uma informação dele é prestada.
Every time an information is given to the bank more than the money, the bank protects the information about this customer, and this is mandatory. Right when we have published the LGPD, Caixa has created a whole structure of data governance. This data governance structure controls everything I do with any piece of data. In addition to that, we have a department that deals with data of people. What we have,
Cliente que entrega a informação para mim, como
we have a customer that gives me information. How do I control that so that the treatment is only the one that we have agreed with?
qual é o cuidado
And what is the care that I have to keep so that this data doesn't leave my domain? Because banking confidentiality requires a lot, but most importantly is the confidentiality of people. Everything that people have in our bank, we control the information, and we have to make sure that that is protected, not by chance. We always talk about
levantou ainda há pouco, a gente fala sobre o atrito.
the friction with the customer.
Aqui há que se fazer
Once again, we have to do this trade-off between friction in the customer journey and to make sure that piece of information is reliable and protected. I have to work so that I make sure you and the data is not wrong. In Caixa, we take a lot of care about that. In our app,
mais atritosa do
there is more friction than other banks, but that's a corporate decision.
garantir
I'm going to make sure
embora eu tenha
or that my customer data is safe, sometimes with more friction than my competitors, but we make sure that the customer who gives us their data and their resources, it's protected, and there is a huge regulation that should be complied with. If we meet the regulations, there's no, you shouldn't be congratulated for that. That's the minimum you should do. And we try and do more and to make the customers comfortable despite all the challenges that we have every day. Thank you. Fiocchi. Just to add to what Widamar brought, security is a given. I'm going to talk about what we've done at Rappi. First, that cyber has never been close to fraud as today. So the movement there is, our VP is unified, and we've done another aggressive movement. We could work with the internal security. We are under the same leadership with a common north, and about appetite to risk and friction more aggressively than what we have done. We brought the users of fraud to the growth, which is crazy. There is a huge conflict of interests. But given that the metrics of fraud continue to be the same, we missed looking from the prospect of the user. Who is the user that I want to generate friction and risk appetite so that I can have new orders? So that changes the overview of how a product of fraud should look at that. I'm not concerned about cyber or AI or with my lines of laws. I have to be concerned about the user and if they're leaving impact or not, how much of risk appetite, how much money they leave. To me, what is the trade-off? How much do we want to put in terms of appetite to risk? Talking about what we just did internally, these two major movements changed all the prospects of working with fraud in the company. Caio, at Serasa, security and privacy are non-negotiable pillars. We also sell reliability to our clients and to consumers. The design of our architectures and solutions, privacy and security are critical. They're always taken into consideration. When we talk about sensitive data, Serasa has know-how of how to keep that piece of data, to have governance of data, because it's very important to be transparent. And transparency is about which data is being collected and what are the purposes. Sometimes we see some deviation of purpose, breaking confidence, and it's bad for everyone. So transparency and privacy are the core for the company, and it's used in all of our products, including biometrics. I have an interesting piece of data. 72% of people are concerned about providing biometrics to the financial institutions. As financial institutions, we take a lot of care about security, the law 105. These people are not afraid of providing their ID or biometrics to enter the building, to buy something in the supermarket or at a drugstore. So there are different understandings of people. The banks that are safe, highly regulated, they have a restriction. But for other activities, we don't know where these data will get to. And then people give them easily, biometrics and the ID. So this is very interesting. If you allow me, we have made a survey. 72% of the respondents, I don't know if they're the same people, but despite of being not too sure about sharing data, they feel safer when the financial institution requests biometrics. It's not every time. There'll be more critical moments or channels, but this fear of that.
Michele, como a IA pode proteger?
How can AI protect the digital identity? I see AI as
estratégia que tem que ser adotada.
A strategy that can be adopted. There's no turning back. It's a path that has to be taken. And the use of AI, protection of digital identity, the first one of them is the detection of anomalous behavior. This is what we do at our laboratory on AI security. We have been doing that, which is detecting behavior in real time. As I said before, there is this approach before using biometrics in a more static way, but AI has those dynamics, including, it's not the dynamics of real time, but this is what we have to look at and to use AI
forte dentro dos nossos sistemas.
in a stronger way in our systems, integrated with what you have been saying. The behavior when the user is typing in a way that is not according to their standards. So where will that data be matched in the system? This type of information to feed the systems have to happen. And if we do that without AI, there's a huge complexity. AI makes that easier. It takes us through that path, and we have to explore that. This line is not consolidated in the survey. It's being developed. There's a lot to be done, but it's what we can do right now. The second point is detection of fraud and using our imaging. AI can identify if it's the image was generated similar to you, or if it's you who are there having that perception of the system in several points, not only the measurement of the face, but luminosity,
Características na própria pele. Então ela consegue também.
skin features.
Que nós não conseguimos.
So it brings this layer that we cannot do traditionally in image recognition or digital.
Outro exemplo que eu gostaria de trazer é a
Another example,
autenticação
or fingerprints,
contínua, né? Que
continuous identification sometime before, also as a prototype in the lab, the need for you to do recognition by vital signs. There would be a watch that takes our data and vital signs. They would analyze those vital signs and authenticating continuously in our systems. I see that as reduction of friction, where we can open the app of the bank, we would have those data, and we would be authenticated on the app by these our vital signs. It's just an example of how AI can be used for protection and use of digital identity in what we're talking about.
Já que nós estamos falando em IA,
Since we're talking about AI,
autenticação biométrica,
trends in biometric authentication are moving towards contactless multimodal systems integration between AI and biometry. Which innovations are on your horizon, on your radar? What can we expect in the future from banks and partners? Caio?
A gente tem estudado muito
We
além da
have
biometria
studied a lot beyond facial biometry, which is our most mature product. We've analyzed other modalities,
que acompanha de perto, academia e tudo mais. A gente tem
and we've been following up projects that are in academia, and we have our eye on the rest of the world to see what also the rest of the world is doing. I
que a gente tem caminho indo
believe that
do comportamento.
the path forwards is behavioral analysis of patterns, multimodal. In this event, we have Serasa PES,
Da biometria,
where we
ela
use
dispositivo, do
biometry linked to a device and other factors. We have a huge database, and we're able to avoid reuse of the identity. When it can be fixed robustly using state-of-the-art intelligence, using blockchain as well, then I think that in the future, the issue of biometry
utilizáveis.
will be creating identities,
A primeira versão do
and
nosso produto
at the moment it's the first version of our product, but biometry is one of the tools.
que a gente
Nonetheless, I think that
íris, de pulso, a de
for
comportamento
example, pulse wrist-worn devices and behavioral analysis. Some of these modalities are technically or financially unfeasible. There's a challenge. Facial biometry has overcome that barrier, but I think that combined with other technologies, they're the future for the market. Itamar.
Como a gente estava falando, o apetite hoje é do banco.
Today, the appetite is on the part of the bank.
É a hora que eu vou conseguir trazer.
One of the things is about how to share that appetite with the customer. Suppose, as the professor said, IoT, talking about IoT, how can I monitor a customer in terms of everything they do in their daily life to have a profile of the client? If they allow me to do that, then the guarantee of their identity is much greater for both of us. If I have a customer who accepts that kind of follow-up, let's say, I'll call it that, they could benefit from that. I see personalization and personification not from a bank's point of view, but from the client's point of view. The customer may say, no, I'm okay, I'll use I'm going to use my fingerprint. Do you have contact, etc.? Okay, but if they want that, we're always saying that technological or banking solutions,
Identifiquei você, a partir daí eu monto cardápio.
I've identified you out of a whole, let's say, a menu of characteristics. So why can't the customer decide how they want to be identified? They share the risk, and we also share the friction, depending on what risk you're willing to share with me. My point is this: how can I do this with IoT? Because what's interesting about IoT and AI, I'm into technology. The only difference is the massive handling of data. Everything else is silly. It's just the algorithm. Anything that you have in your hand, what makes it different is how it can handle and how much data it can handle. And when you say they learn, what do they learn? They learn behavior. But how can I use that intelligence, which looks at a range of information and determines if the client is or isn't who they say they are? Let's have AI. Let's look not necessarily at the client. As a person working in anti-fraud, the main problem is not fraud against myself, for example, Itamar, but it's fraud that comes very surreptitiously and changes the profile of the bank, not Itamar. It can have a delta of 0.5% for Itamar, but when you apply that to everyone, that comes to a lot of money. So I want to use AI to go beyond this identification of the customer. So in the view of the client, when they use devices that are not my devices necessarily, this helps a great deal when they authorize me to monitor a number of more things. It's like insurance. If you want to let the insurance know more about your life, the lower is your premium. I think more and more countries will embark along these lines. And there's quantum computing on the horizon too. Fiocchi. At Rappi, our movement over the last 2.5 years is that we've left behind a traditional anti-fraud model, orchestrated, rules-based, traditional, machine learning, really. And we're now at Future Store. If you don't know what that is, go and Google that afterwards. It means you use machine learning model that it self-learns, and it also makes what it learns available for creating models and rules. And you learn the concept of feature store over steps, and this will dictate the level of risk that the rule has. And the problem with that is as soon as you start to manage a great deal of data to create all these features, we have 4,000 features, for example. Every time they go through a workflow, for example, setting up a request, there are 2,000 features that I run. There's a cost there, it's a large cost.
Acoplar muita tecnologia.
If I want to couple a lot of, or attach a lot of technology to the process, there's a cost, and it's associated with the performance.
Então, apesar desse movimento,
Despite the movement that we have
constantemente a gente passa por
followed, we're always undergoing reviews of processes and our control of anomalies that we're implementing to know how much friction we want to give and how much we want to deliver in terms of trust to the customer at that step they're passing through. There are some suppliers who are here at the event who use, for example, location or localization and anomaly generation, the position of the apartment. Are there people nearby who share the same Wi-Fi and passwords? You can map all of these things. It depends on a consensus. If the company has an appetite for risk, to manage that and share it with the user so that you can control, not always with the friction of biometrics, face ID or fingerprints, etc.
Perfeito. Bom, aqui a gente tem desafio à frente aqui.
Well, we have a challenge. And coming back to the issue of friction, Brazilians love technology. See the example of PIX, which was massively adopted quickly. If we come to a moment where, at the moment when somebody enters a relationship with any of us, Idamar, where we can share and they allow us to share some data to reduce friction, we would use technology for that. The way that Brazilians are into new technologies and gadgets and everything, I believe that from the line or the trend towards security for them in the system, I think they will consent and permit this, on both sides, their side and our side. So it could be a contactless authentication, which takes into consideration behavioral levels and patterns. I think the path is very interesting for us to look at this pathway of validation. Michel, security, non-invasive security solutions, the importance of these for multimodal biometry and trust levels of users, trust in the processes offered. As I see it, non-invasive biometry, such as for example, vital signs and other signs that we can gather data without much friction, I think that's going to be growing, and it's going to grow customers' acceptance of the use of these in apps. And I'm thinking along the lines of IO2 and mobile devices. It extends the scope of authentication, and therefore in our scope, banking transactions. This in the case of non-invasive. Multimodal biometry has a number of layers, 2 or 3 means of biometric authentication. When you use a number of different credentials, this makes the end user more confident. But it all has to do with what Itamar was saying with regard to consent. When you go to non-invasive biometry, you're working with data that are increasingly sensitive, such as vital signs, people's behavior, privacy, regulation. Regulation is very much in fashion. There's a lot of things that we need to protect ourselves through. How are we going to protect the data that are gathered?
Falando dessa autenticação,
And we often talk about non-invasive authentication, but it's going to be continuous authentication.
os modelos eles vão
So that the models that are going to be more real-time,
atuar
there's not much
de problema.
of a time interval to react if there's an issue.
Maiores dentro desse processo,
These are major challenges in the process.
caminho
I think it's a path
facilita essa
that will facilitate
dentro
users' acceptance
mais dispositivos móveis, aí
using, for example, IoT and mobile devices, but it's a great challenge in terms of managing the set of data and the time constraints.
tempo de atuação para autenticação
The time for the authentication to occur and the time to react if there's any kind of a problem
dentro desse
or attack in the process.
a abrangência de
The
ataques é muito
attack surface is much greater now with this the number of devices involved.
Na era das deepfakes,
In this time of deepfakes, we now see that there's a possibility of circumventing facial biometry and voice technology. Biometrics is not a silver bullet, so what are the best practices for avoiding misuse? And if you combine it with other modes, what would the other modes be? At RAPI,
utilizada há 3 anos
we've used, for the last 3 years,
aqui,
through one of the suppliers here,
sobre o aspecto de device
who help us a great deal with regard to device location. Combined with biometrics, this increases our rate of confidence as to whether there's some anomalous behavior in terms. We deal with physical deliveries. So, for example, from the point of view of the address, for example, where their device is, and other aspects about our delivery, this enables us to be more confident in the delivery.
Essa combinação que eu comentei no
That combination that I mentioned,
features que a gente tem,
the features that we have,
adequados,
and the right suppliers
multimodal,
as against the multimodal layer, which we call an infinite journey.
uma etapa
We don't want to be hostage to any particular one linear voyage. We don't want to fix people to particular points, but we want to be able to track the user in different places, be more flexible, maybe restrict the way in which they're ordering or the items on their order.
pra gente
It's a trade-off, and this is a kind of a combination. I'm not the hostage of a single combination. I can test more things,
praticamente eu consigo
and
mais ou menor
I can
eficiência dependendo
be more or less efficient in terms of the stage at which I am.
então assim,
So, to cut a long story short, there's no silver bullet.
tem que trabalhar com o modelo de
We have to operate with a solutions model under the hood.
As empresas brasileiras
Well, Brazilian companies need to evolve from the point of view of the maturity of this condition, of flexibility to apply the infinite multi-layer journey. I still think that for some industries it's more possible, but for more regulated settings like banks, it's more complex.
não necessariamente é uma verdade.
This is not necessarily absolute truth, therefore. It depends on the institution, their moment, their level of maturity, and the maturity of the regulation that they are complying with. We're a marketplace, so we're simple from the point of view of risk appetite.
Certas camadas
It's easy for us to apply certain security layers or flexibilities we wish to give to the user because the regulatory aspect is less severe. Idamar,
Bom, primeiro a gente tem conjunto de
there are a set of
segurança
layers of security that the way I see it at the Caixa Econômica, we've tried to disseminate this perception. Some things are very internal and they ensure security and safety. Others, you need to go more towards the customer,
eu preciso dar
make a move towards them. And when that happens, first of all, I have to
mas que por vezes
talk about, let's say, public information. I call them public. He may not even know it's public. Rappi, for example, you use location.
Suficiente para eu definir. Ali está assim, o Caio.
I wish that location was enough to tell me that Caio is here or there. So, for example, he may fuel up his car on the way to the airport. It might be really near his home, or it might be near the airport, and his next operation might be in London. So localization or location is different for me. But I can separate things out. So, for example, what is actual fact, like the person's face, perhaps biometrics. And I can also look further ahead environmentally and know where he is, which Wi-Fi he's using.
Não é o comum dele.
It's not his usual Wi-Fi, and in the next step for that person, I can look at how he's using the device. Is that how he usually uses the device? For example, the way he's typing, is that how they usually type?
A nossa biometria
Our biometrics
aí é quase comportamental.
is basically almost behavioral. This is a change that we have to do. It's a little bit like a customer graph with a lot of information, and I move along it until I can absolutely confirm that he is him. Our anti-fraud thinking is that we assume that nobody is the person who is speaking. So I try to confirm that it is. And instead of not guaranteeing that he is the client, I use deeper data that can identify if they are really themselves. The way we see it, we're going to take a while to get there. 150 million customers. If I have that amount of data on everyone, on a graph for each one, with technological solutions
Do processamento quântico.
before quantum processing, where the fraudster may get that before us, which is serious. If you look at them, they have this amazing organizational structure. Sometimes it's much more balanced and definitive than,
Com metas muito mais claras.
and sometimes with targets that, and for example, if somebody doesn't achieve a target, they pay in more severe ways. It'll take time, but
Conta que eu acho que
I think we need to think carefully about that. How can I always be ahead of that guy, that bad agent? We're trying to catch up with them. Whenever we close off one breach, they circumvent it. Another thing, I don't know if we'll ever get there. It's not Serasa, but I would need somebody like a .gov.br that I could trust. I'm not saying I don't trust .gov.br, but the financial market really believes in and trusts that person, that I can trust that .br, and the rest of the market can, and I can see that
está se comportando.
I can see then how the fraud market, not just the anti-fraud market, it's too complex for everyone to share all the information, that the security information they have. We're a bank, we sell security. But if we're selling it and in competition, I have to say I'm more secure than he is. I want to be able to share more information with you. Well, let's go and have a talk afterwards then, Idamar.
Ponto que eu gostaria de, antes de passar a palavra.
Before giving the floor to Caio, I'd like to say that fraudsters and scammers, essentially they're a company,
Todo regra,
but they don't have all the rules and compliance that we have to follow.
coisas mais
And this sometimes doesn't allow us to do more effective things. For example, data sharing, information sharing. We at FEBRABAN and other entities we have a technical cooperation agreement with the Ministry of Justice, and one of the pillars of that
compartilhamento de informações.
is information sharing, because at every event that I'm able to take part in terms of fraud prevention, scam prevention, everybody says we need to share information more. So really we need to focus on that and really work hard on that.
por gentileza.
Caio?
Eu sou pouco otimista.
I'm somewhat optimistic, and I have some practical examples of cooperation.
A nossa biometria
Our biometrics
uma validação
is not only a single validation about whether that's Idamar's face, we have insights owing to other information.
ClearSale sobre
Using ClearSale, for example, the CPF, the individual taxpayer number. For example, there's been a recent note of fraud.
exemplo
And another example that is practical, looking at the issue of devices, we had a case where a major bank was looking at a biometric solution only for them, and it was Albert's face, for example, on the face, and a number of faces began to appear from the same device, the same place.
sendo aliciado.
Other people were also being lured into the fraud office, as it were, to do this. And we were able to detect this because of the behavior. So it's not just, it wasn't a photograph of biometric, it was basically a film, a movie. And so what's happening with this particular device? And then we were able to track that device. There are many other things, and there are other types of data from other devices and data sources, etc.
Mas a gente acredita
And we believe in that approach
não dá
of analyzing the movie, as it were, not just the static photograph. This helps the ecosystem.
Michele.
Michelle,
A biometria como credencial
as a credential for authentication, biometrics is one of the most expensive that exists among all these factors that can be used.
eu acredito bastante na
I believe in
fatores
multifactorial identification, which is widely used,
obviamente é necessário se continuar
and we need to continue with that policy to validate biometrics
acrescentar a segurança que é
to add the security that is given to the end user. So what would be the best practice? The answer to that question is very complicated.
eu acredito
And I believe that the continuity of the use of multifactorial authentication is one point. The other point is a discussion that we had about AI
para a verificação da
for the verification of the liveness,
aquela imagem
that image and that digital fingerprint is from a living person or not, and continuous identification, as it was mentioned here. I don't see that as a single practice or best practice, but as a set of practices and factors
dados dentro desse processo.
that are coordinated in this process. We are getting to the end of this panel.
Gostaria que você
I would like you, with the final remarks, to tell us what are the biometric metrics that are advanced, that are safer and more reliable, and why. In your opinion, Caio,
ainda continua
to me, it is facial biometrics. As I said, it's the more feasible, the effectiveness, there are very good levels of detection and conversion. So because of applicability, I think that today, facial biometrics, when we talk about voice, we have to have specific channels for good performance. Or iris, we can work with the accessibility of some users. So the most effective one is facial biometrics.
Primeiro agradecer
First of all, to thank you very much for the organization of the event, of this panel, a very relevant subject. As I said, I don't believe in an only solution of the several factors and techniques that we have in each context and each need in the process we are evolving.
existe uma única
So there is not a single solution, but a group of all these techniques and possibilities. Idamar?
Como o professor falou,
Actually, we cannot talk about the silver bullet all the time. We cannot say it's going to be this or that because there's no silver bullet and there won't be. Maybe if we had like a cartridge that would, like a machine gun, we would
Mas
hit
eu não acredito
everything. But I don't believe that this is going to come to an end. I have a wonderful solution for that. I think we have a set of things that will evolve. Today, facial biometrics give us a lot of trust
depois que ela é
after
uma biometria verdadeira.
it is a true biometrics. The onboarding is our issue. It's where the fraudster can work. But when taking that, that's very reliable. I think it's very interesting that 72% are afraid. They're afraid, but they trust it. Brazilians are like that. They don't believe in it, but they trust it. So I trust that the solutions of biometrics will have result. It's what we can bet on, but there are other factors that validate them. So we have to have more information of people and to have a set of data. Only the points in my face should not be enough.
Empurrando isso aí para
So
e mais do que isso. Vamos
more than that, let's try and make the customer share with us their risk or a little bit of their friction.
por último e não
And last and not least, we have to share information. On the other side, there are lots of people who are very well organized. On this side, we should use the Serasa expertise of RAPI, of the academia, and to bring it over here. This is bad for everyone because I work with banks, and banks work with risk, and risk is everyone's. Who work in banks and who don't work in, who lost and who didn't lose. Somebody will pay for this bill, and in the end, it will be good that there is no fraud. This is good for everyone in society. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, Idamar.
Obrigado pelo convite. É um prazer estar aqui com vocês.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Actually, a point that I would like to bring that is relevant, we can explore the concept of biometrics so that it's not so biased to liveness or document verification or a set of things. If we come here next year, we're going to talk about different things about biometrics and how solutions will develop for both providers and for merchants.
Se a gente conseguir
So if we can give more capability and to solve real issues with artificial intelligence, I think that's where we will take advantage so that we can use the concept of biometrics in a more comprehensive way. It's very positive, it's very effective, but in one solution of biometrics, but not the entire concept. So if you can apply that in different journeys, the friction we want to use for the customer, I think everything will make more sense. At least that's my opinion. That will be a good future.
Eu acho que foi tema importante.
I think it was an important subject we've talked about. We see that, to paraphrase you, there is no silver bullet. All of us need to have the work of seeking the best methodology so that we can reduce friction with our customers, but with more security for them. Here, we have to do what Idamar said, which is sharing information, cooperation between systems. In the world of fraud prevention, there is no competition. We have to work in collaboration.
Nós estamos aí junto com a
And for that, the Ministry of Justice have the Tentacles project in the federal police that is being expanded, and we want more people participating from the financial institutions and other entities, all the police forces, so that we can reduce the crime that it's not only in Brazil, but it's all over the world. The crime is very strong, and it's a battle that I don't know if we're going to win, but we will work with it for many years.
A presença da
I'd
Michelle.
like to thank Michelle, Idamar, Caio, and Fiocchi for being here. It's a pleasure. I'd like to thank you all for being with us and see you next year.